during the previous nights of the local time. Of course, first of all, we're going to start with the Kupiansk front line. During the night, we got a lot of very interesting updates, a lot of details about the operation, about the current status in this area, and so let's discuss them one by one. First of all, we got update that somewhere at 10 p.m. of the local time, to be more precise, at 11 p.m. of the local time, the Russian sources reported that the Russians managed to enter Sinkovka and that Ukrainians started evacuation process and withdrawal their positions. So basically, the Russians entered the settlement from the forest on the south of Liman Первый, and after that, the Russians started declaring operation in the northern outskirts of that settlement. The question is why the Ukrainians took a decision to step back. Furthermore, somewhere at let's say at 2 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. of the local time, the Russians reported that they managed to liberate and capture or establish 100% control over the settlement. For now, we haven't received any official statements, any official reports regarding the situation in Kovka. But very reliable sources and very high authorities of the LPR Republic reported that the Russians during the previous days, including the previous night, managed to develop and develop their positions in their bridgehead in the vicinity of Liman Первый, Sinkovka, and in the vicinity, the most important, Ivanovska, this small settlement that located on the west of Yahidne. So, as I understand, the Ukrainians, of course, probably had some plans to protect Sinkovka, to fight with the Russians and so on. And when the Russians entered the settlement from the north, probably there were clashes in this area, but according to the reports, the Russians attacking not just from Liman Первый, also the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation from Alshany. So as I understand, because of this, exactly because of this movement, the Ukrainian sources realized that currently they can get encircled, and that was the reason why the Ukrainians took a decision to step back. So from one side, we see, this is very important, by the way, the piece of news, because if we take a look at the map, we see a lot of mechanized forces in this area, a few territory defense brigades. Probably there is a lack of artillery brigades. The information we have, there is just 15th artillery recon brigade. Probably some brigades, the Ukrainians have possibilities, artillery brigades, to redeploy from Liman front line. But anyway, we see that Ukrainians took a decision to step back and not to fight till the last Ukrainians for the settlement. Probably we see currently the evolution of Ukrainian military idea and military doctrine. Currently they understand that sometimes it is much more important to save army and soldiers, but not to fight for some settlements that located in the gray zone. Anyway, according to unofficial sources, the Ukrainians stepped back to the south. Furthermore, the Russians, some sources reported that there was a very fierce clashes and close combat exactly in the vicinity of Kupiansk. So basically, there was fightings in the settlement. Probably the Russians currently have already established control, not full, but probably some control. Currently, maybe there is a clearing operation and ongoing Russian offensive operation. Furthermore, the sources reported that according to Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians took a decision to step back. Furthermore, the source reported that Ukrainians have already evacuated territory defense brigades, and there are just mechanized forces. And some sources are saying that because of like a very big number of mechanized forces in this area, probably this is not the forces that are going to repel the Russians' attack, but probably this is the mobile rearguard forces that will withdraw their positions at when time comes, or something like this. So furthermore, this is exactly the situation. So the Ukrainians understand that probably they will be forced to step back. From my side, as I understand, that currently I'm not sure that Ukrainians are going to step back. Maybe this is another like fake operation from the Ukrainian side, and they've tried to force the Russians to start attacking, to be more active, to stretch their offensive orders, and so on. But the thing about the absence of territory defense brigades, and that the major part of the forces is mechanized forces, of course, this forced me to think about many different tactics and many different things that can be developed in this bridgehead. Furthermore, the Ukrainians confirmed that the Russians continue pressure in direction of Ivanovka and Stepovo-Novoselovka, but yet without any progress in this direction. So we'll see how the Battle of Kupiansk is going to be ended. But I understand soon, or today, at least today, according to some sources, we are going to receive more positive updates in Russian favor. So let's wait. Now we're moving further to the south, to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk area. There are no changes on the ground as well. There is no changes in comparison with the previous days. The Ukrainians continue their bombing and shelling in the Russian positions in the vicinity of the settlement with drones, trying to control and to save control over the supply roads of the Russian forces in the vicinity of Klishevka and in the vicinity of Andreevka. The Ukrainians control the roads. The situation is very difficult for the Russians. If we increase the number of updates, we see that the main roads are under Ukraine control. They see everything and they try to destroy every single Russian armored vehicle or truck that moves in the direction of Klishevka and Andreevka, and that can bring some supply and support in this area. From the Russian side, we got video how the Russians destroyed the M777 howitzer somewhere in the vicinity of Chasov Yar, the howitzer that Ukrainians were using to support their offensive forces, probably in the northern part of the northern flank of Bakhmut during the failed attempt to penetrate the Russians' defense belt, and the Russians published another video of bombings of the Ukrainians in Klishevka. Now we're moving further to the south, and we got also a lot of updates from Urozhaino. As you can see, according to the map, I have updated the map. Currently, the situation, the Ukrainians published the video how they entered the settlement from the south, and basically this information confirms that the Russians in Urozhaino were attacked from two sides, from the north and from the south, and currently the settlement is in the gray zone. I'm not saying that like this, the situation is 50-50 in this area, but not there is no full control of the Russians over the settlement. The Ukrainians attacked the Russians from the south, and with just mobile infantry groups that can cross this river with the small platoons and to enter the southwestern part, and the Ukrainians try to dig in deeper on the north and to continue offensive operation from the north. The Russians are trying to stick to the central part and to save control over the main evacuation roads that's still under Russian control. So this is the first evacuation road for the Russians that they can use for evacuating soldiers along the forest lines, and of course the strict way to the south along the edge streets in the central and the east central part of Urozhaino. But yet nobody controls the settlement for 100%. Now we're moving further to Bradley Square, to Orekhov area. I have also updated this map. These previous days, the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians launched counter-offensive operation, and the Russians published the results of that attack. The Ukrainians sent armored vehicles, sent infantry. The Russians discovered and started attacking the Ukrainians with the demining equipment. Maybe this is not like a clearing operation or something like this, but anyway, there was like some clashes in this area, so that's why I took a decision to change the status of this territory also in the gray zone. So like, let's keep it like this. Also, the Ukrainian sources published the first probably evidence of massive usage of cluster munition, cluster rounds in the vicinity of Rabotina. So on this video, on this photo, we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the fields, which also confirms the control of this territory, that this territory is under Ukrainian control, and this is the massive usage of cluster rounds. And probably Rabotina was the first area where the Russians started using this type of weapon massively. When talking about Dnipro area, we haven't received nothing after the clashes in Kozachye Lagery. The only thing I would like to note that the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that they even were forced to use those flamethrower systems in this area to stop the Ukrainian activity in this area during the previous days. Anyways, I understand the Ukrainians were forced to step back, and probably the Ukrainians have some forces, infantry, and some reconnaissance squads in the islands between the banks of the river. But the thing is that according to the Ukrainian sources, those days they were meeting in the General Staff of Ukraine with Zelensky, and Zelensky are trying to force the Ukrainian military authorities to start this operation, let's say the DD operation, landing operation at Dnipro River. The Ukrainians understand, the Ukrainian military authorities understand which kind of level of losses they will face during this operation, but Zelensky insists on this operation because of pressure from the Western countries, because he needs to show some results. And first and the most important, Zelensky wants this operation not because of support from the Western countries. Zelensky wants to repeat the same situation as the Russians made in Kupiansk front line. While the fierce clashes in the vicinity of the Zaporozhye area, the Russians activated their offensive operation in the vicinity of Kupiansk area, which forced Ukrainians to send significant number of reserves. And the only possible solution for the Ukrainians how to slow down and to stop the Russians in Kupiansk is to open and to create another points of pressure. And the only solution he see is to open the front line in the Kherson area somehow, no matter the losses, which will force the Russians to stop in Kupiansk and will force the Russians to send significant number of reserves in this direction, just with one purpose: to slow down and to stop the Ukraine offensive operation, no matter how bloody this operation is going to be. Also, the Russians reported that this night they managed to prevent the drone attack in direction of Moscow from Ukraine. So another drones were sent from the territory of Ukraine, or probably somewhere from the area of Moscow. Those drones were shut down, and another drone attack took place in Crimea as well. The Russians, as an action of revenge, or probably at the same time, made massive missile strike using Kinzhal. The explosions took place in Dnipro, Zaporozhye, Kramatorsk, in the Kramatorsk fields, in Kharkiv area. We got just one video confirmation. For example, in this video, we see the explosion in Zaporozhye, probably with Kinzhal missile. So also another attempt to slow down the Ukrainian movements and to slow down their forces in the vicinity of Bradley Square. Another interesting update that recently, a few days ago, there was a massive bomb strike against Orekhov using the guided bombs, and as a result of that attack, the entire command center of 47th Mechanized Brigade was destroyed, including all officers of this brigade, which reduced the level of activity and level of communications and connections in this brigade. So very successful attack. The commander of that brigade was destroyed in Orekhov. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds by the way, one more thing, final thing, just a second. Yes. According to information we have, the Ukrainians in the Ukrainian parliament started discussion about the law, and this law will not allow the young people from 16 years till 18 years to leave Ukraine. So basically, the Ukrainians have already started the preparation of the next phases of war. They started, collecting and calculating the mobilization reserves that they're going to receive within 2 years. And one more time, from now on, people from 16 to 18 years are no longer allowed to leave the territory of Ukraine. To be more precise, there are talks about of course, the men population. And currently, that's it for today.